got a bit of a formula for info dumping where, well, not a formula, that makes it sound too mathematical, but the degree to which you can get away with info dumping is directly related to how much curiosity you can arouse within the reader. So the more curious you make the reader about your world, about the characters, or about the past, the more you're allowed to get away with the info dumping. And the reason why Paternus works so well is because you create an immense amount of curiosity because you're like, there are these gods and there are these creatures and there are these immortal, beings and all these thousands of years of history that they all have together. And that creates such a burning desire within the reader to kind of know how it all fits together and how all the puzzle pieces work, which then allows you to have the excuse to info dump.
Yeah.
Where info dumping goes wrong
Yeah.
is where you don't create that suspense and that curiosity for the readers.
And if you don't, I mean, that's why I always say character is number one for me. Because if you don't care about the characters, where they come from, what they're doing, who they are, what they're like, then any amount of info dumping is just a fucking info dump.
Yes. So I think, definitely the curiosity aspect and the suspense is really important for it. And that probably comes back to Rob's point about trying to like drip feed your info dumping throughout the book. I think a bad example is like if you read, let's say, the start of The Hobbit or something like that, those older fantasy books, they just hit you with like 20 pages about the dining etiquette of dwarves or something like that. And you don't really have any like attachment or interest in these characters so early on in the story. So it is a kind of boring info dump unless you're really into reading about that. But if that information came later, maybe it would have been more interesting. I think the sequencing is really important.
If you're doing it right, like Rob does or like Mike does, then maybe you do too, Jed, but I still haven't read any of your books. I just have to admit, I'm sorry. Maybe you do too. But
I do everything in my books perfectly, Dirk. And when you read it, you'll be blessed with great art.
They're simply not info dumps. I will. But if you do it like those guys do it, they're just not info dumps. They are just information.
Yes. Hope you enjoyed that clip. You can check out the full episode exclusively on our Patreon using the link in the description down below.